May 1942. The German army has been tremendously worn out after its great offensive on the Soviet Union and urgently needs new units to reinforce itself. During the 6 months between June 22 and the end of 1941, the German Wehrmacht suffered more than 700,000 casualties on the Eastern Front, including dead, wounded, and prisoners. The situation became even worse when, during the winter of 1941, the Red Army launched a series of offensives to push back the German forces, mainly off Moscow, which resulted in another 336,000 casualties for the German army in the first 3 months of 1942. With this rate of attrition, it became imperative for the German army to mobilize all possible human resources to keep up the fight. Despite their appeal to all their allies, including the Italians, Romanians, and Hungarians, to send as many soldiers as possible to the Eastern Front, this measure was not enough. Under the leadership of Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, the Luftwaffe had become a completely oversized force with nearly 1,700,000 troops by 1941, representing around 20% of the human resources of the entire Wehrmacht. Responsible exclusively for air operations, the Luftwaffe also included a large number of ground units, which constituted the majority of its personnel. Delivered to the Luftwaffe include all the technical support personnel at the airfields, the anti-aircraft defense units that accompanied the ground army, and the famous German paratroopers, called Fallschirmjäger. During the crisis suffered by the Wehrmacht at the beginning of 1942, Luftwaffe personnel located in the different German airfields on the Eastern Front were mobilized to fight in the vicinity of the airfields that began to be attacked. In addition, thousands of men who were located in the rear were sent, who after receiving brief training in infantry tactics by parachute instructors, were sent into combat. In the summer of 1942, with a new major offensive underway in southern Russia, the German High Command devised broader plans to mobilize additional manpower. Among them, it was proposed to transfer 50,000 Luftwaffe troops to the army. At first, the leaders of the German army demanded that the 50,000 men of the Luftwaffe be transferred to the ground army, known as the Heer, but Hermann Göring was adamantly opposed. Without a doubt, he was not willing to give in to so many men and lose control over them. Distrusting the Heer High Command, considered more conservative and clinging to the ideals of Imperial Germany, Göring obtained Hitler's approval to retain these personnel in the Luftwaffe. In this way, and due to the great influence that Göring still had in mid-1942, it was decided to create the so-called Luftwaffe Field Divisions, which would fight as regular infantry, although they would do so while integrated within the Luftwaffe. With the Führer's approval, any opposition to the project by army officers became unviable, allowing Göring to issue a call on September 17, 1942 to recruit volunteers from across the Luftwaffe and form his new divisions. The first Luftwaffe Field Divisions began to be formed at the Grobern Training Ground in Pomerania from September, and at the Mielau Field in East Prussia, and were numbered 1 to 10. Shortly later, between in late 1942 and early 1943, another 11 divisions were added until the number of 10 Luftwaffe Field Divisions was reached. A final division was proposed but was never formed, so the number of divisions remained at 21. In total, between 1942 and 1943, approximately 250,000 airmen responded to Göring's call and volunteered to serve in the new Luftwaffe Field Divisions. Most of the men coming from the Luftwaffe came from administrative and logistical departments, and consequently, lacked training in the use of weapons and infantry tactics. Despite their precarious condition for combat, the military training they received was very hasty, and after 1 or 2 months of training, they were sent to the front at full speed. In this way, and due to the critical situation that was being experienced on the Eastern Front, there was hardly time to train the Luftwaffe men and to distribute equipment and material. Luftwaffe Field Divisions were about half the size of a standard Army infantry division, being considered a brigade by German Army commanders. Its total force amounted to about 6,500 officers, non-commissioned officers, and soldiers. Each division consisted of 4 infantry battalions instead of the 9 usual in an army division, distributed in a command company, 3 infantry companies, and a heavy weapons company equipped with machine guns, mortars, and 4 2-centimeter flak machine guns. As support units, they had an anti-tank battalion, a heavy anti-aircraft battery, and 2 light flak machine gun batteries of 2 centimeters each. They also had an artillery battalion with 7.5 centimeter cannons or heavy Nebel Werfer mortars, as well as an assault company with Stug 3 armored vehicles. Despite the theoretical allocation of 616 vehicles, many divisions had to rely on horse-drawn carts for transportation due to a shortage of suitable vehicles. On the battlefield, the divisions came under the tactical command of the Army but remained directly dependent on the Luftwaffe for personnel management, administrative matters, and equipment. The first operational deployments of these divisions quickly revealed the insufficiency in both their training and equipment. One of the first units to enter combat were the 7th and 8th Divisions, which were directly involved in Manstein's attempt to rescue the besieged garrison at Stalingrad. In this operation, called Operation Winter Storm, the use of both divisions in the offensive action was catastrophic, leaving both the 7th and 8th Field Divisions of the Luftwaffe practically annihilated in their first confrontations with the Soviets. At the same time, the 2nd Division suffered heavy losses during Operation Mars in the Arjev sector. These defeats showed that the Luftwaffe's field divisions had, at best, the capacity to act as defensive forces in peaceful sectors of the front, a role to which they were quickly relegated by skeptical army commanders. Some senior Heer officers, such as Erich von Manstein, issued highly critical reports on Luftwaffe divisions, considering them a waste of human and material resources that could have been better used to reinforce various army divisions. From here, several plans were devised to reorganize the Luftwaffe Field Divisions. The most striking was to dissolve some of the divisions and redistribute personnel to strengthen the remaining ones until reaching a strength of 12,000 troops like those of the rest of the Army's divisions. However, it was concluded that only the Army could provide adequate training and equipment for these divisions. Although Hermann Göring again refused and objected to losing control of his campaign divisions, he eventually had to give in to pressure from Hitler. Consequently, a directive from Hitler on September 20, 1943, forced all Luftwaffe Field Divisions to come under the control of the Army. In this way, all Luftwaffe officers in the chain of command were replaced by Heer officers, and from November 1943 to mid-1944, all units were restructured according to the organizational scheme of the German Type 44 Infantry Division. As a result, many soldiers from these divisions decided to abandon them and return to the Luftwaffe, being replaced by older recruits or by men who had been recruited on the Eastern Front, some of them former Soviet prisoners of war. In early 1944, after the transition to the Army, the Luftwaffe Field Divisions remained second-class formations, largely made up of unmotivated or overly aged troops, relegated to occupation or static defense tasks. Of the original 21 divisions, 3 had already been disbanded due to heavy losses suffered, even before coming under Heer control. Most of the remaining divisions were deployed in the places we will indicate below. Some participated in operations in the Balkans, and others protected the defenses of the Atlantic Wall on the Western Front. Two of the latter were transferred to Italy for the final stage of the campaign, once France fell into Allied hands. The other divisions remained on the Eastern Front, facing the last Soviet offensives that gradually destroyed them. At the time of Germany's surrender on May 1945, only one of the Luftwaffe divisions had remained intact, this being number 14, which was located in Norway. One of the divisions that did have a certain role during the final phase of the war was number 11, which participated in Operation Spring Awakening in the vicinity of Lake Balaton. It is estimated that in total, some 250,000 men were part of the Luftwaffe's Field Divisions, of which the majority caused casualties on the different combat fronts. Regarding its effectiveness in combat, all analysts point out that the human potential of the Luftwaffe volunteers was wasted in the creation of a kind of private army alternative to the real army, in an attempt to create a Waffen-SS according to Göring's wishes.